Thank you, Mr Speaker. December is the time of year for making lists and checking them twice. That's certainly what the member for Warringah's doing this Christmas. But he's making a list in 3 columns. He's not doing his Chrissy cards, he's counting the numbers. But, Mr Speaker, at the end of the year I thought we should put together a list of the government's star performers. It is a Melbourne Cup field of failure, but there's a few standouts certainly. There is the Treasurer. He reminds me of that fellow from that film Anchorman, you know, Brick. Brick from Anchorman. You remember? He's up there shouting loud noises into the microphone while he waits for someone to tell him what's going on. Rolled on negative gearing by the Minister for Immigration, rolled on superannuation by Senator Bernardi, and the first piece of legislation he brought into the 45th Parliament had a $100 million counting error. But to his credit, he did put forward a very strong anti-unicorn policy this year. Then, of course, there's the Minister for Foreign Affairs, everybody's loyal deputy. Does anyone in Australian politics put any more time and effort into their one Dorothy Dixer a week? All those late nights rereading Mark Latham's book, all that preparation for one little segment. She is the Liberal equivalent of Media Watch. And speaking of women in leadership, let's talk about that great champion of gender equality, the Deputy Prime Minister. Remember what he said when he was asked this year about getting more women into Parliament? He said, "I've got a good track record." And then he gave us a few examples, and I quote, seriously, Scotty Buckholz, although I must admit he's not a woman. Matt Canavan, Danny O'Brien. That's Danny with a Y, Mr Speaker. They're 3 people who've gone through my office. That is the modern National Party for you. Postmodern, gender-blind, ready for federation. Of course, there's the Minister for Immigration. He's the fun one in the group, thin-skinned and easy to roast. You might remember his little outing with the boom mic, or as he calls it, the high watermark of his comedy career. I'd like to say more, but the last time I quoted in this place, he went off on a national sulking tour. Every day the Minister of Immigration was out there attacking me for reporting what he said. I finally understood how it feels to work at Fairfax or The Guardian. Mr Speaker, a lot of us in this place have children, and we all know they get very excited on Christmas Eve, jumping all over the place, determined to stay up late and wait for Santa. But for the parents of Australia, I've got good news. I found the solution. The Minister for Urban Infrastructure. 3 minutes of him at the dispatch box and you and your kids will be out like a light.
3 minutes?
There's a lot more who deserve a mention. The Minister for Environment, the only person who thinks that getting coal for Christmas is a reward. The Minister for Revenue, who in the morning opposed our reforms to negative gearing because they would push prices up, but wait for it, in the afternoon opposed them because they'd push prices down. And then, of course, there's our old friend, the Leader of the House, who in just a few sitting weeks has managed to break a 50-year record by losing votes on the floor, break a 115-year-old record by having the government vote against itself, and to be fair, not only is he dragging down the government in the chamber, but the member for Corio tells me he's dragging down the ratings on Pine and Miles. But you really can't go past the filler in every political stocking, the gift that keeps on giving. Senator George Brandis. I tried to make a list of the Attorney-General's top 5 blunders this year. Suddenly it was a top 10, and that was just November. I mean, you'd need a $15,000 bookcase to document this Attorney-General's failures. And what's this government's agile and innovative solution to the worst Attorney-General in the history of the Commonwealth? Make him an ambassador. He's being promoted out. Only in this government, the more you fail, the more you get promoted. London's calling, and amongst his colleagues I understand it can't come soon enough. But you've got to give the Prime Minister some credit, or at least a sense of humour. For 80 years, the British government sent us the prisoners they considered beyond redemption, the sweepings of their society. And in one fell swoop, Australia will get its revenge. Mr Speaker, the reality is that this Prime Minister and his government are finishing the year just the way they started: divided, compromised, sharpening their weapons for civil war. Look at the mess they keep making of this backpacker tax. A debacle from day one. No consultation, no modelling, no idea. An ambush of regional Australia, of agriculture and of tourism. This government's economic plans are not worth the paper they are printed upon. They lob things up, they pretend they're set in stone, and then they crumble. And now they can't swallow their pride, they admit they got it wrong and help out the regions. Are we really meant to believe that this Prime Minister, who's given up on everything he believes in — remember, he's the champion of marriage equality, the champion of climate change, you name it, he was the champion of the ABC. Now he cannot move for 2%. And no doubt, whatever they work out, this backpacker tax has been a debacle, and it shows this is a government not capable of governing. And I mean, when you look at it, this is a Prime Minister who always caves into the bullies on the backbench. He is the pawn at the front of the chessboard. The member for Warringah is the king on the backbench now. His colleagues, Liberal and National, have worked him out. They know the Prime Minister is so weak, that he's so focused on his own survival, that he is so desperate to keep his job that they can tweak his tail and get whatever they want. And every time he sells out, he sells Australia short. This Prime Minister, barely a year ago, came to office with the highest approval ratings in a political generation. And after a year plus of coalition failure, he had an unprecedented opportunity to set a new direction for this nation. The nation hoped that when he rolled the member for Warringah, that perhaps we would see a different sort of politics, a new economic direction. They hoped that he would take real action on climate change. They hoped that he would put the climate deniers and the flat earthers back in the box. They hoped he would deliver on marriage equality, to end the injustice in this country that denies one group of citizens a right extended to all the others. They hoped he would undo the damage of the 2014 budget, the cuts to schools, the cuts to hospitals, the cuts to pensions and families. And instead of fixing these problems, he has made them worse. Instead of a new direction, he has doubled down. It's the same unfairness with the new extravagance, the same cuts to the vulnerable, the same punishment for working and middle-class families. But he can find $50 billion for a tax cut for corporate Australia, and he can find money for a tax cut for millionaires. He has a plan that punishes Australians who can't afford it and rewards those who do not need it. It is the failed, flawed experiment of trickle-down economics, the same old conservative nostrum of survival of the fittest, of dog eat dog, an ideology which says that if you fall behind, you get left behind, the worst possible approach to a changing economy. And the very way he has conducted himself in this backpackers tax debate highlights the true weakness at the core of this government. In his heart of hearts, he knows that Labor's move from 10.5% to 13% involves a more modest move from them from 15 to 13. But here is my prediction. This is a government who would rather look at the politics than the policy every time. It is clear that you could simply bridge this difference for a very small amount. But my prediction is this: the government would rather go to the fringe dwellers in the Senate than deal with Labor. This is a government who says we should all work together. But every time there is an opportunity to work with Labor, they are more committed to their opposition to Labor than they are to the good government of this country. The only thing that unites this government is their furious opposition to Labor and the rights of people to join unions. There is nothing else which unites this government except their dislike of Labor. At their core, this is a government motivated by hate, not hope, by fear of the future rather than an optimism about what we can accomplish together. This is a government who, at the end of 2016, is marked by their desire to fight Labor than to govern Australia. Every question time since they've got elected, all they have done is attack us. They never talk about their dreams or their hopes or aspirations for Australians. We, on the other hand, we know what's important in this parliament, and it isn't the people who sit here, it's the people who elect us. We will make sure in 2017 that we stand up for working and middle-class Australians, that we will stand up for their jobs, their education and their healthcare. We will do this and more.
Order.